The 1978 Michael Cimino directed film, The Deer Hunter, shocked audiences to the core. It's the story of a trio of Russian-American steelworkers whose lives are completely changed forever after fighting in the Vietnam War. These characters are played by Robert De Niro, Christopher Walken, and John Savage, with an excellent supporting cast of John Cazale, which, by the way, is his final role, Meryl Streep, who he was in a relationship with at the time, and George Zunda. It doesn't get much better than this with this cast of characters. Michael, played by De Niro, Nick, played by Christopher Walken, and Stephen, played by John Savage, are three lifelong buddies from a steel mill town in Pennsylvania. They work together, they hang out together at local bars, and they enjoy weekends deer hunting with three other friends. Their placid life is soon to be changed after they enlist in the airborne infantry to go to Vietnam. They spend time in celebration and to say goodbye at Stephen's wedding, after which they leave for Vietnam. Once they get there, they're shortly captured by the enemy, and they're forced to play sadistic games, strictly for the amusement of their guards. The game they're made to play is roulette, played with a revolver with one bullet in it that is spun in the chamber, and then each participant is forced to fire it at themselves. Now, if you notice the way I'm describing this game they're playing, I'm leaving out the real name that this game is called. And I do this strictly because of YouTube's guidelines, and their computers will pick that name up pretty easily, and they'll demonetize this video. So from now on, when I mention this, I'll use the abbreviation of RR to describe it. Eventually they escape, and Mike returns home to find that Nick stayed in Vietnam and that Stephen is completely handicapped after losing his legs and the use of one arm after their escape. Mike finds that deer hunting has completely changed for him after he experienced Vietnam. He returns back to Vietnam during a failed attempt to rescue his buddy Nick. Now, the production of this film was just monumental in task. Everything was filmed on location. There were no sound stages used. This was as gritty and dirty as it gets, and it caused some terrible struggles for quite a few of the actors. One of the most notable is John Cazale. He was very weak from lung cancer when they began filming the movie, and for this reason, all of his scenes were filmed first. The director knew this from the start and was well aware that he was dying from cancer, but the studio didn't. When they found out, they wanted to replace him immediately. Meryl Streep was in a relationship with him and had been for a few years. When she found out the studio's intentions, she threatened to walk off the set. It's said that after shooting each night back at the hotel room, Meryl Streep would bring aid and comfort to John as he tried to recuperate so he could film again the next day. He eventually died in March of 1978, shortly after filming was completed. He never ended up seeing the completed film. The lady who was given the task of casting the extras that were used in Thailand had a lot of difficulty trying to find a local to play the vicious-looking individual who runs this RR game. The first actor that they hired turned out to be incapable of slapping Robert De Niro in the face. After more searching, some of the locals told them about a Thai man that had a particular dislike for Americans, and they cast him in the role. These slapping scenes were 100% authentic. The actors grew really agitated by the constant slapping that went on when they were filming, and this added so much to the realism of the scenes. In the scene where Stephen is yelling, "Michael, there's rats in here, Michael," as he's stuck in the cages in the river, John Savage is really yelling at the director, Michael Cimino, because he had a terrible fear of rats, which were infesting the entire river area. He was wanting the director to pull him out immediately from the water because of these rats. He was terrified. This wasn't scripted, but it looked so real and it fit in so good to the situation, they kept it in. During the filming of the wedding sequence, which takes up a good portion of time, Michael Cimino encouraged the many extras to treat the festivities as a real wedding because he really wanted to increase the authenticity of these scenes. Prior to filming the wedding reception, he instructed the extras to take empty boxes from their home and wrap them up as if they were wrapping a real wedding gift and bring them to the set when they came the next day. These fake gifts would be used as props for the wedding reception. The extras did as they were told, but when Cimino inspected the props, he noticed that the gifts were a lot heavier than an empty box ought to be. He tore off the wrapping paper of a few of these packages, only to find out that the extras had in fact wrapped real gifts for the wedding. The director did everything possible to have the props department help develop all these characters as much as possible, down to the slightest detail. Each of the 6 principal male characters carried a photo in his back pocket of all of them together as children. This was done to enhance the sense of camaraderie amongst all of them. He also had the same prop department fashion Pennsylvania IDs for each of them, complete with driver's license, medical cards, and various other pieces of paraphernalia, just to enhance each actor's sense of his character. Now, the director, Michael Cimino, was criticized heavily for his one-sidedly portraying all the North Vietnamese as sadistic killers. He came back with the statement that the film was not political, nor was it literally accurate. He didn't even think it was posturing on any particular viewpoint of the war. He further went on to defend his direction of the film by saying that he had newspaper clippings that confirmed that these brutalities happened during the war. Now, the RR scene is probably one of the most disturbing clips of film that you'll ever watch. The intensity that is created through the setting they're in and the viciousness of their captors is something that I don't think I've seen in very many movies. This kind of rises to the top. One of the things that made it such a strong performance was that it was shot in real circumstances, with real rats and mosquitoes, with real slapping going on that increases the level of distress that are on the main characters. It's visible. You can tell a lot of this is achieved through their sheer discomfort in the setting they're in. This kind of film could never be done today in the way it was done back then. The studios just wouldn't allow it to happen because the actors barely got out of shooting this film with their lives. And when I say this, this is not a stretch at all. They were almost killed a couple of times. The other thing that made it terrifying for them was when they were shooting the war scenes in Thailand, the cast and the crew were dogged by the threat of being kidnapped. During that time, the country was far from being stable, and they had armed refugees and military groups that were just running wild throughout the countryside. Many of them saw kidnapping a famous American as a way of making a quick buck. The production hired heavily armed guards to keep this from becoming an actual event. They dealt with poisonous snakes, wrapping themselves around their legs, and plenty of the filming sequences went terribly wrong. At one point, the 3 main characters held on to bridge struts as an army helicopter accidentally sliced through their metal safety cables, leaving them clinging on for their lives above the rocks and the raging river that was 60 feet below. They knew they were in terrible trouble when those cables got cut. Panic immediately set in, and they knew that this could be the end of their careers. This film is terribly disturbing. If you've never seen it, you ought to spend the 3 hours that it takes to watch it. You'll leave with a totally different view of what some people probably endured while fighting in Vietnam. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll continue to chase the classics.